Hey guys, this is Fusion here, and welcome to the EG Bleed Blue podcast. This is the podcast where I talk about everything Evil Geniuses, or at least as much as I can think of off the top of my head. As you've already noticed, probably at this point, yeah, I got a haircut, so that's new. But yeah, besides that, hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode with Warborg. It was something I was keeping secret for a really long time, so hopefully, I did a good job as a host and asked questions that were genuinely, things that people did not know. And, maybe we were able to get answers to questions that we weren't really sure about. And so, yeah, it was an honor and it was a pleasure. And yeah, just to kind of reiterate that, yeah, it was awesome. So hopefully you guys enjoy that as well. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend go watch the previous episode of the podcast where I brought on the head coach of Evil Genius's Counter Strike division, or not their division, but their EG Blue team, so their main roster. I'm gonna start trying to call them EG Blue instead of the main roster because I understand for marketing purposes it's bullshit, but for marketing purposes, technically it's not the main team because there's no such thing as the main team because it's all the same team because the players can switch between the rosters. Whatever. It's your team that's going to all the big events. It's the main fucking team. But I'm gonna try to call it EG Blue because I'm sure it would make people happier. So I'll do that instead. I will please the crowd, I guess. Um, yeah, actually though, I'm only really going to be talking about Counter Strike in this episode. No League of Legends or Dota 2 or anything like that because I actually think there's a lot to talk about with Counter Strike squads because a lot has been going on. Um, so yeah, just kind of catching people up on who's who's been going to what events have been happening and whatnot. The EG Blue Squad hasn't really done too much, although they did just participate in a Cash Cup where they got second place. They lost to ATK. And before you throw your hands up and say, "Oh my God, they lost to ATK," I think it's really, really, really important to remember that they didn't have Neelan and they didn't have Cirque. Because they're over in Europe, obviously, right now. They're not available to play. But they needed Hexed and Breeze and Automatic to play because they needed points to ensure that they would be able to go to the, I believe, Katowice qualifier for next year, something along those lines. And so they needed to make sure that they at least participated in the tournament, and they had to reach, I think, like fourth place or not fourth place. I think they needed like second place or something to confirm their spot, but they already had a decent amount of points. Astralis was also competing with them for so basically the three teams in the running were like EG, Astralis, Pain Gaming, and maybe ATK. I'm not really sure. But basically, I think how the points worked out, EG's safe. They're going to be in the qualifier. I think Astralis had to win their CCT event, and they didn't. They got second place. They lost to Copenhagen Flames, my boys, with Borup and all them. And and then or I should say Vorborg's boys. And then other than that, I think they needed to place a certain. They had to place well enough in the Cash Cup they participated in today. I say today as in Sunday, and they did, so it's fine. I'm not really too concerned about the fact that they lost to ATK. It doesn't really bother me. Without Nealon mainly, honestly, it's a whatever to me. You know what I mean? Especially once you figure out that it didn't matter at that point. Obviously good to try to win the cup, but it doesn't really mean anything to me. It's a cash cup in the off season. Who cares? You know what I mean? Who cares? As long as you get the qualifier spot for Katowice, that's really what matters. So, yeah, just kind of indifferent. Breeze kind of underperformed a little bit. I think Automatic did well. Ponalone did really well. Important to note that. So that's obviously bonus points for Ponalone. That'll obviously I'm sure something that they'll take into consideration if Cirque does not perform to the standard that we want him to perform at the end of this season. I think it's important to note that. I'll kind of get and break some of this stuff down as we go throughout the episode because I received some criticism regarding my viewpoints on Evil Geniuses and where I think they are in regards to the Blueprint project, as well as just the main roster or EG Blue in general, and the Blueprint Project, and basically all the different teams and whatnot, and how the Evil Geniuses Counter Strike division is structured. And I received some backlash of my own opinions, and so I'm gonna break those down a little bit. But so I'll get into. I'm basically gonna be going through those questions and those criticisms throughout this episode because by doing it that way, I will eventually, by going through all those questions, talk about everything that I want to talk about regarding evil geniuses instead of me talking about the things I'm going to talk about and then answering the questions, just repeating the same things that I already said. So I'm just kind of use that kind of as my guideline, as my benchmark, and then we have a bonus question at the end, which I did a little poll regarding individual aim talents, which I'll kind of explain at the end of the video. Other than that, so basically, while the main roster competed in this little cash cup thing, I guess, which it wasn't even really the main roster, it was just put under the main roster, but with no in-game leader because they had Viz and Ponalone. I don't even know who was in-game leading. I don't know if it was Viz or who was in-game leading, or if it was probably just a committee. So yeah, I'm not really sure, but it wasn't really the main roster guys. And so don't really take too much concern with that. But while that was going on, we had a lot more stuff happening that was that was important for this week. E.g. White is competing in CCT, which CCT North America, or at least they did compete in CCT North America. It ended. Um, but look, I think the CCT events are good for EG White because those are really the best events for them to be able to compete in. And so I hope this is something that that CCT is going to continually do with some level of frequency, because it's a really good way for, at least for an EG White perspective, it's really great because it allows them to compete in something similar to ECL in a way, where they actually have something they can compete at and try to win. Because when they go into these qualifiers for these other events, even if they win, if the EG Blue squad is playing in that event, they're not going to be able to play. So EG White is a team that I really have the most concern with in terms of what the plan is for that roster in particular, in terms of what's the purpose of EG White, besides just developing talent. How are you going to develop that talent in a different way to EG Black, who obviously has ECL, which we'll talk about in a second. Is there a way for EG White to consistently get matches, to where they can develop the talent that they want to develop? Because otherwise, without ECL, there's really not a whole lot EG White can compete in, which is obviously not good for player development. So, that's kind of the concern with EG White. And I was hoping that EG White would be able to compete in something like the We Play Academy League, but for obvious reasons, they would have to have a very young roster. And even if they had a young enough roster, I don't know that that the parents of the players and whatnot would be able to consent for those players to travel to another country to compete in an event. I just think that's a little bit unrealistic. If it happened, it would be great, but I'm not going to hold my hopes on that. So hopefully CCT is something that continues and is something that is consistent, so that EG White has something to compete in which case you can definitely justify having the EG White squad, and there's a purpose for it, and there's a direction that you can say, hey, look, it's dependent upon how you perform in CCT, and we'll kind of, that's your equivalent to ECL, kind of. I think that would make sense. So hopefully that is the case. So anyways, EG White was competing in CCT North America. EG Black has been competing in the ECL, obviously. I don't know what season this is. Let's see, season 43. And they're currently playing in the finals right now against MIBR, which I'll talk about in a moment. And that's kind of where the teams have been at. There was a brief stint where EG Black had Vorborg and Automatic and Breeze, and were playing in I believe it was another Cash Cup, which I believe they won. I watched a little bit of it, but it was overall it was pretty good. It was pretty fun to watch them play. It was an interesting roster because it was a roster that we could potentially see. I'm not going to say that we are going to see it. I'm just saying there's potential for it depending on how these players develop within the next season of play. So basically by summer of next year. Because the roster was Wiz, automatic, or I'm sorry, it was Wiz. Was it automatic? Yeah, it was automatic. Wiz, automatic, Breeze, um, George, and Walco. Now, I don't think Walco would necessarily be on. I mean, maybe it could happen, but I just don't see the EG Blue roster getting rid of Nealon. Even I mean, they would have to be very, very bad next season for them to get rid of Nealon. I think Nealon is probably, I don't want to say he's the most unmovable piece, but because he's your in-game leader, this is really the season to prove his worth, I guess. Even though I think he's already done an incredible job with the limited time that he had, with this current roster, I think he's done a good job, especially being as young as he is. Um, so I don't know. I don't see EG giving up on Nealon, even again, they would have to have a very, very, very bad season in order for it to happen, I think. So I don't see Walco being on the main roster. But the other players, like George, could definitely get the step up, depending on how probably, I don't know, maybe Hex. I don't know the role, how the roles would work there. But I'm just saying George could get a move up if he plays really well this season. Um, George could get a move up. Wiz, if Cirque doesn't perform and Wiz performs really well again, maybe they try out Wiz. That's a possibility as well. So I just thought it was interesting because those two players in particular have been performing really well for EG Black, and so that's something that you could look at as a potential roster move in the summer of next year if things go that way. They might not, but I'm just saying, interesting. It was interesting to watch. Um, Also, I do want to course correct on some things I said about EG Black. I was under the impression that Stanislaw was IGLing EG Black, but it's actually Walco. I didn't know that. Being honest, I really didn't. So every time I've said Walco is, I don't know why he's on the roster. Well, he's on the roster because he's in game leading, um, which I guess makes sense. But to the same degree, I would rather Stan be IGLing, not because I think Stan is necessarily a better IGL. I just think that I just think basically that I would prefer to have younger fraggers as your developing talent. Sorry, storage is not my friend at the moment. You'd want more young fraggers to develop on your team with Stanislaw and Rush to support them. And so, yeah, I mean, if you want to develop an in-game leader, cool. But I also just don't know that developing Walco as an in-game leader is as fruitful as developing someone like Stamina, who I just think has just been so incredible. In terms of his experience and what he's done in his career already. I don't know. I think Stamina basically is just the next in-game leader from North America. I really do. But maybe that ends up being Walco, and I'm entirely wrong. It's possible. You know what I mean? I wouldn't. It wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if he learns a lot. I think he's well. I mean, to be honest, with EG Black's performances in ECL this season, I think he's definitely proven his worth. So we'll see. Um, but that's kind of by the by. So just to kind of give you guys the rundown again. So EG Black is participating in ECL. Currently, they've been through the playoffs and they are in the finals right now, playing against MIBR. And then in EG White, they competed in CCT North America, where that has already concluded and they are no longer playing. I don't know if they're competing in anything until January. I have no idea, but that's what they're up to right now. And the EG Blue roster competed in a little cash cup without their in-game leader and Opper. And they took second place and lost to ATK in a 2-1 series. So that's kind of the rundown on everything that's been going on. It's been kind of nice being an EG fan this week because even with the off season around, it doesn't really feel like too much of an off season because there's always teams to watch. And by the way, EG Gold is winning their games, but I'm not gonna be. I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't. It's not that I don't care about EG Gold. It's just that the best way to judge how good EG Gold is by their performances against other good teams. They're not really playing other good teams. If they play a CLG Red, I'll take that into consideration, obviously. But if I'm just being honest, their performance, at LAN was so atrocious and so bad that I just don't know what to say. You know what I mean? Like it was just so bad. Um, there wasn't a whole lot of hope or inspiring confidence with that particular result. So we'll see. If they have any big marquee matchups, obviously I'll talk about it. But there's not really a whole lot for me to discuss with EG Gold. So, um, yeah. I think okay. Moving on. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how I'm gonna change this topic thing on my top left. I don't really know. I guess maybe I can just go to confronting. Oh, this is not going to work. Confronting the criticism. I did not spell this right at all, did I? Criticism. Sure. It's obviously all messed up. I can do that. This is not very well coordinated, as you can tell. But hopefully this helps. Maybe it doesn't. I don't really know. But I didn't really know what else to title it really. Because it's kind of weird. I'm going to be bouncing around through a lot of different topics as we go, basically. But I'm kind of using this as a template. So if there's something interesting that you're thinking about, just kind of we'll go along with it. First thing I want to talk about is kind of how this all started, how the criticism kind of came to be, and it all kind of stemmed from this picture that Moonster tweeted regarding the kind of the structure of Evil Genius's management, which look, I don't know that it was inspired off of the podcast episode where we kind of broke it down a little bit, but it definitely helps. You kind of see it from a wide, a top-down perspective, a 50-foot view, or whatever you want to call it, right? And so I'll kind of show that here. So as you can see, he aptly named it the Rocket Scientists. Very nice touch with the little spaceship. And you can see here, Director of Athletics hashtag not hashtag slash GM Valens, which if you guys remember is kind of what I assumed the director of athletics meant, and this is mainly I thought this because Andy Barton, is the director of athletics for the MOBA games as well as some of the other esports as well. And so I assumed, knowing who Andy Barton was, that must mean that it's kind of like the GM or director of operations for those particular esports that are mentioned. Which, by the way, guys, side note, I know Andy Barton had a podcast or was shown on a podcast talking about the League of Legends squad, I believe. I will get to that next episode. It's just there's a lot to talk about with the CSGO team, so I will talk about that next week, hopefully. I will try to make a reminder for myself to talk about it, um, so that I don't leave that out of the loop, because that's obviously good information. But as you can see here, Valens is kind of the head of operations for the entire project. You've got Sunshine, who's a player admin, and Mad Cow, who's also a player admin. But Mad Cow is the player admin for the EG Blue roster, so the main roster, while Sunshine is the player admin for the EG White, EG Black, and EG Gold rosters. Um, and then over here you can see that the strategic resources. So this is like the analysts type thing. Is HEPA and Malik, and they're working with every single roster. And so I made a tweet basically where I was saying that this was, you can definitely see how Malik and HEPA are being overworked because there's 4 different rosters that they have to put their attention on. And obviously they're going to put the most attention on the main roster, but right now where the main roster is in the off season, EG Blues in the off season, they're going to put their attention towards probably EG Black and EG White, and more emphasis on EG Gold, obviously, as well. Although EG Gold, after their LAN event, are I think slowing down until next season starts. But this kind of gives you a nice, overhead view of it. You can see the coaches. Munster's the coach for EG White. Axe is the coach for EG Black. Onter is the coach for EG Gold, and Vorborg is the coach for EG Blue. And so when you see 4 different coaches, they're not 4 different coaches all going to every single roster. It's for each specific roster, which I think was supposed to be pretty obvious. But obviously, when you put in your bio just head coach for Evil Geniuses, because Evil Geniuses was kind of dumb, and they said that basically every roster was the same thing. They didn't want the rosters to be known as EG White, Black, Gold, and Blue. They kind of wanted it to just all be EG, to not, I guess, differentiate, because I don't know. They thought that would be like disrespectful or something. I have no idea. I'm speculating, but like it doesn't really make sense to me. They should have just done this to begin with and made it very clear that Moonster was the coach for EG White, Axe for Black, Onter for Gold, and Vorborg for Blue, and it would have just made things a lot less complicated, and people would have understood it better, and they wouldn't have been memeing all over them as much. But they didn't do that, and that's the cost. And then, and then you got the players here, obviously. But this is just a really nice image because a lot of people have been giving EG shit about how everything is structured and who does what because it doesn't make any sense. And while I do think it's fair to criticize EG for that, and I do think that the obvious gaping hole in this image really is just Malik and Hepa being the only two analysts working for all these rosters. They definitely need more analysts to help them out. And if you want any more proof of that, just go listen to Warburg, where it's not like EG doesn't know this. Warburg literally in the interview with me mentioned the fact that Hepa, I mean, just not only did he not miss, but he literally just does so much work for the team. So, yeah, it's quite clear that he needs more help, right? Um, so I think that's a given. And EG knows that, and I assume that they will try to fix that this season. Um, who knows when, but it's definitely something they're going to work on, right? So, with all that being said, my point being just that EG gets a lot of shit for their, how things were run and who controls what. And I think it's kind of almost, look, obviously it's a good thing they did this, but notice how no other organization does this. No other organization has a coach tweet out the exact structure of the fucking organization. Literally doesn't happen for any other org. Because guess what? Most esports orgs, you don't know what the fuck's going on in their organization. You have no idea who's doing what. It's a fucking shit show. It really is. That's kind of how esports management works in a nutshell. You have people who control multiple games who don't even know what the fucking game even has anything to, what's the point of how the games work and how to even GM those games. So look, I think it's already a good thing that Valens is the GM for EG's roster because Valens is someone who's had a lot of experience in Counter Strike and knows what he's should know what he's talking about, right? Um, Compared to having and people are gonna give me Valens doesn't do why the roster shit. Look, Valens in terms of North American Counter Strike, he definitely knows his shit. And it's better having Valens as the fucking GM than Andy Barton. Like Andy Barton isn't gonna know what Valens knows about Counter Strike. Um, so yeah, that's the point. Um, and no other organization is doing this. And I'm not saying that they should get EG should get credit for doing this because it's obvious that they're kind of memeing on the whole thing. Um, but I do think that it's quite silly that people always point to EG and say they don't know how to run an organization, but they don't look at literally every other fucking organization, to the same degree. I mean, I think the ones that they do it that people do it the most to, and honestly, it's mostly Thorn and Richard Lewis, is they point to the obvious one, which is Astralis, because they listen. At least with Astralis, like Astralis, like did not only did they have a 10-man roster, but they lied about having a 10-man roster, and they quite clearly did not care about the players they have been putting on that roster. EG is a much different story. They have a 20-player roster and they clearly fucking care about it and they clearly want to develop it. Okay, they're not doing this because they don't they just it's a money grab or because they want other players, it's some scheme to make sure that players can take breaks. That's not the reason why they have these other rosters. They quite clearly have these rosters because they do actually want to develop talent. It's something they actually want to do. And so I think that's something that people are kind of just overlooking, and they just look at fucking 20 players and they go, "Oh my God, 20 players, what a joke!" Which, by the way, it's kind of inflated because let's be honest, the EG Gold players, uh, in theory, they could move to the main roster, guys, but let's be honest, like at best, they're moving to EG Black or EG White, and that's going to be a tough ask in and of itself. So we'll see. But my point basically being, it's not like EG is doing this in bad faith. They're not doing this, and they're not putting this money out there just to fucking because they're trying to sell rosters off and they don't fucking care. Like that's not what it is at all. They clearly care. They clearly want to develop talent. And if you want more proof than just what they've been the fact that they've been moving rosters around and whatnot. I mean they've literally signed players like Momo who have been performing really well. George is performing really well. Wiz has developed quite well while he's been on the EG Black project. Even Chop, even though he's not there anymore, Chop developed quite well. He was actually performing much better. I think Walco's in-game bleeding has gotten much better. So yeah, I don't know, man. Like the logic that people try to use is kind of insane to me. But basically, this is kind of what started it all. I basically said this is a nice way to lay it out, and that you can definitely see that Malik and Hepa are overworked, and that what I'm really glad that they actually, even though it's a little bit of a joke, they actually did make this image and kind of put this in public so that people can stop fucking memeing them over how the roster or how the organization runs their Counter Strike division, because now it is inevitably clear, or undoubtedly clear as to who does what and what the who's controlling which things and who's responsible for what. So when something goes wrong, you know who to blame, right? So I think that's a very important point of emphasis here. So that's kind of what started everything. Because like I said, I basically just said, yeah, I'm glad that they did this. I think it's it's obviously they kind of, it's funny that they put rocket scientists, it's a nice little jab. And they clearly are running with the joke, which I think is what you should do. You should run with the joke. You should make fun of it. I think it actually would be, not just because I'm a massive space fan, but I just think it would be super cool if they did some type of space themed EG merch shirt. I just think that would be a cool idea. Yeah, marketing team, I'll just do your job for you. Uh, I'm sorry. I take such unnecessary jabs. Well, I don't know. There's somewhat necessary jabs at the marketing team. It's all in good fun. But I'm just saying it would be a cool idea. You know what I mean? Just an idea I'm throwing out there. You don't have to listen to me. I'm just a random nerd on the internet. But yeah. So overall, I just think it was a good post, right? Good post. Lots of good info there. Yeah, that's pretty much my only point. Um, I ended up getting some backlash by, of course, Log15, who, by the way, if I'm saying your name wrong, if you're watching this, if I'm saying your name wrong, just give me the phonetics and I'll say it right next time, or try to. Um, but yeah, he basically said, one of the few times I find your view clouded or diluted by your fandom of EG. This might visualize it, but it's not explaining why the teams are so fucking bad, and the org doesn't seem to try and fix it. First thing I want to point out, okay? First thing I want to point out, and he didn't necessarily. I want to kind of separate him from this because he didn't say this, but it came to my mind when he brought up saying things like, "I find your view clouded or diluted by your fandom of EG." I just want to specify, and I talked to Vorborg about this, so he fucking knows. He'd be the first one to tell you this. Just because I did an interview with Vorborg does not mean I'm going to be any less critical of Evil Geniuses. It doesn't mean that at all. I'm thankful that the marketing department, I believe it was probably the marketing department or the PR department. I'm glad that they approved my interview with Vorborg and that Vorborg was allowed to kind of be on the podcast with me. It means the world to me. It really does. But I think everyone knows I'm not going to be any less critical of Evil Geniuses because it happened. Mind you, guys, I knew that this interview was going to happen about a month or two in advance, and I was not any less critical. In fact, I was very critical when the Dota 2 roster was removed, and we went through the whole, the twitlongers and everything, and we talked about it. And Alex, I believe it was Alex Garfield, and we went through the whole thing, right? Um, I'm not going to be any less critical of the team because of it. It's just not who I am. In fact, and if you don't believe me, go look at the literally every single episode I've posted. And for the most part, guys, if you had to take the positive comments for the negative comments, I've probably said more negative things about Evil Geniuses than positive. Just being honest, because I'm a very critical person and I self-assess. Not only, and not only do I self-assess myself very harshly, but I self-assess the things that I love somewhat harshly. I do. I'm a Sixers fan. I do it the same thing with them. I'm an EG fan. I criticize them. It's not because I don't like them. It's because I care about them so much that I want them to be something special and something amazing. And so I criticize them. So don't think for 1 second that because I had an interview with Warborg, I'm all of a sudden going to be a kiss ass and I'm going to be super super nice to EG and I'm never going to do anything wrong, or not never do anything wrong, but just not say anything super super harsh about the organization. That's what I mean to say. Um, so just wanted to point that out there. He's not saying that here. I'm not implying that he's saying that here. Let me get that straight. It I recognize that some people may think that I'm going to be like that because I was able to have the opportunity to interview the head coach, and that's not who I am. Okay. Now that that's out of the way, this might visualize it, but it's not explaining why the teams are so fucking bad and the org doesn't seem to try and fix it. Again, not really the point. The point of that image really is to just show the management structure for the team. And so that's kind of the whole point of it. In terms of it's not explaining why the teams are so fucking bad. Um, First off, I would like to say I don't think he's implying here that every team is really fucking bad. I don't necessarily think that's the case. But to kind of go to the main part about explaining why the teams are so fucking bad, I just think like that's just not what this is supposed to show at all. Again, it's only showing the structure. And yeah, you're right. It's not explaining why the teams are so fucking bad, but that's because it's not just about the management of the team. It's not how the structure is. What defines how good a team is, sure, the management structure plays a role, but it's how is the management interacting with the players? Who are the players on the team? What are the expectations for those players on that team, right? EG Blue, the main roster, sure, sorry guys, my thing right it stopped recording again because of space. I really need to get that fixed. Um I don't really remember what I was talking about. Explaining why the roster is bad. Why does this not explain why the roster is bad? Look, there's a lot of context that is involved with how well a roster does. For example, I don't think if you looked at the structure of FaZe Clan and how they run their Counter Strike division, I don't think you could look at just how it's formatted just by who does what and say, well, this must be why they're better than everybody else. This must be why they're the best team of 2022. That it's not going to do that, right? Obviously, it's dependent upon so many other factors about the players, their careers, or what's going on in their careers right now. Who are they working with? What are they working on? Where are they in their careers? There's so many things that go into play with that. This image of showing the structure of Evil Genius's Counter Strike division isn't supposed to explain why they're good or bad. It's just supposed to explain that okay, this is who's in charge of what. And so when you see something and you go, wow, wow, EG Black isn't performing well, which isn't true right now, but EG Black isn't performing to the level I'd want them to. You know who's in charge. You know who the players on the roster are. You would know, I guess you would know the player admin for that roster. You would know that Valens sees everything and oversees the entire project, and that Malik and Hepa kind of, slide in and when needed to kind of give them analysis and whatnot, and that acts as the coach. That's the whole purpose of it. It's not to fucking explain whether or not the roster's good or bad. That's not the point of it. If you showed the structure of fucking, again, if you showed the structure of FaZe, it's not like you're gonna see FaZe's structure and like a shit team like EG. I guess if you want to put, obviously EG's not exactly a great team. I wouldn't say they're good. I'd say they're probably bad. I don't think they're atrocious. I don't think they're fucking terrible, but I think they're bad right now. Obviously. I don't think you're going to be looking at the structure of EG and the structure of FaZe Clan and going, wow, FaZe Clan is so much better. That must be why they win more games. It's like, no, that has nothing to do with it. It only plays a small role in a much bigger picture. So it's not supposed to explain why the teams are so fucking bad, which I already don't agree with. Let's break it down a little bit. EG Gold. Yeah, I can't defend EG Gold. They were shit. They did not play well at LAN. But EG Blue, they were bad, but they're much better than they were for the first half of the year. I mean, if you look at the EG at the first half of this year to the EG of the second half of this year, it's fucking night and day. And I can tell you that because I literally watched EG lose games so atrociously for 2 years. Nearly 2 years did I watch them just awful. Awful gameplay. So fucking bad. I mean, they couldn't even get 10 rounds. They couldn't even get 10 rounds in games, bro. I know this. I lived this. I watched the games. I know. This new EG roster is much, much, much better than the previous iterations of EG. Much better. And if you can't see that, then you weren't paying attention to the team. Which, by the way, I'm not, like, you shouldn't be paying attention to those shitty EG rosters. You shouldn't, because they were so fucking bad, it hurts your soul to watch. They were that bad, okay? They had no fucking identity. They had no sense of, like, there was nothing there. It was just fucking, it was a black hole of depression and darkness. It was that bad. Um, so I'm not blaming you for not watching that, but if you're going to criticize this new EG roster in comparison to the old rosters, uh, well, I think if you're going to criticize the new roster, you need to compare it with the context of the old rosters. And if you thought that this was just going to be some 180 turnaround, where they were just going to fucking while after announcing the Blueprint Project, who the sole purpose of was to develop North American talent. If you thought they were just going to blow everything out of the water, it wouldn't make sense for them basically to announce the Blueprint Project that they're going to develop North American talent, and then they're just going to fucking completely get rid of their entire main roster and sign an entirely new European roster. Because why would you have a main roster that's entirely European and then have an academy roster that's supposed to develop NA talent? It doesn't make any fucking sense because you would never. What are the odds that you're going to bring up a North American player to an EU team when the experience gap is just so large? Like you're just not going to do that. So I don't know if that's what you thought was going to happen, but that was never going to happen. And you have to compare the EG roster that is now in existence, which, by the way, people basically said this new EG roster when it was formed is a bunch of fucking nobodies because they didn't know who Hex was, they didn't know who Nealon was, and they said this roster was going to be just as shit as the previous roster, maybe even worse. That was the expectation. People literally had this team going bottom of the group in EPL, playing against Movie Star Riders without Sun Pius and Eternal Fire. That's where people had EG. I think overall, the season for EG is a success. It's a mild success, right? It's a success. It's a success that needs to be built upon. It's a success that needs to be like, hey, that was a success, but we need to build on that. And next season needs to be much better so that we can really start gaining, so we can keep climbing this hill that we're going up. Or really, at this point, it's a fucking mountain, considering where you started and where you're trying to get to. You got to keep in mind, guys, EG was so fucking dog shit. I don't even think they were in the top 100. If they were, it was a fucking miracle. So they went from Stewie 2K absolutely sabotaging the entire fucking roster and literally still leeching off of the organization, and basically defaming them. Oh yeah, by the way, Smooya didn't fucking help with that. And then going from that absolute abomination, absolute rock fucking bottom, to now being a borderline top 20 team who went to the major, who almost got out of their group in EPL, and almost beat Team Liquid in a best of 3 in a high stakes match. Look, could it be better? Yes. Could it be much fucking worse? Absolutely. It could have been much fucking worse. So, sure. Let's say I don't think that they're fucking bad, but I'll give it to you, they're bad. Like, ideally, EG, I would like them to be a top. They should be a top 10 team given the caliber of the organization. With this roster, I would like to hope that by the end of this season, they're going to be borderline top 10. At worst top 15. It's kind of weird to even say that at this point because it feels like a top 13 team can beat a fucking number 1 team. It's so fucking strange right now in CSGO, but whatever. That's by the by. Sure, I'll give it to you. They're bad. EG Gold, they're bad. They're not very good. They're the worst fucking EG roster. Not even just because if you played them all against each other, they'd probably be the worst roster, but just in general, that LAN result was so bad. They're the worst roster. EG Black and EG White, though, that's where I have to step in because EG White won Fragadelphia against European teams, by the way. Just saying. If you look at Fragadelphia, I think people were predicting either Apex with Shocks, or Big Academy to probably win the event. And I'd say EG White was probably third on that list, third to fourth, because I don't know if ATK was playing in that event, but look, EG White was one of the top teams, but I think people expected the EU teams to probably win on NA's home soil, and everyone laugh at NA. And that's not what happened because EG White ended up winning the entire event. So to say that EG White sucks, again, it's like you have to define who they're supposed to be competing against, which is North American teams. They're supposed to be competing against North American teams. And in EG White's case, they've been playing in some qualifiers where they end up having to play some European teams, and that's mainly because the EG White team at first was the Party Astronauts roster, and the Party Astronauts roster was so good that they were the best team in NA, and well, for the tier 2 level, and they needed to go into other events, and in fact they even competed in some international events that they weren't technically supposed to because the main roster was supposed to compete in them, but then they didn't do it. Whatever. But my point being, EG White, sure, you can question the identity of the EG White roster in terms of what the purpose of them is going forward. Again, I think CCT helps a lot. But to say that they're bad is pretty fucking ludicrous when you consider that they're one of the best teams in North America, which is where they should be. And the purpose of the project is to develop new talent. They signed Momo, who has been pretty much one of their best players ever since joining the roster, which is not a roster move that I was expecting by any means, but it's been working out pretty damn well. So I'll take it. And again, I hope that more roster moves are made with E.G. White in the sense that, um, I want to see more young talent develop. And they have some young talent. Some of these guys on E.G. White, you think they're old, but they're really not. Like John G's like 23 or something like that. Some of these guys are pretty young, honestly. I think Viz is 22 or something. So they're not old players by any means. I think really the oldest player is really Pone alone. And I don't even know that Ben Lead is that old, to be honest with you. So look, EG White's a roster where I'm glad they made the Momo change, and we'll see kind of how that team progresses this season. And who knows? Again, they're another group of players that maybe one of them gets a crack at the main roster, at the EG Blue roster, if things don't go well this season. It's definitely possible, right? And then as for EG Black, that is the craziest one of all because, mind you, by the time he made this tweet, EG Black was 7-0 in the ECL group stage, and has been. And not only were they 7-0, they were fucking dumpstering teams. It wasn't even close. They were literally not. I don't think they had. I don't think they got a team's got double digits on their map on maps that they played against EG Black. I really don't think. I'm pretty sure they didn't. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure if at best it was like one team got double digit rounds in a map against EG during the group stage of ECL. So that's pretty fucking good. And I don't really and doesn't try to fix it. It's like, what are you talking about? EG Black has made multiple roster moves, and by the way, it's like the logic that like, oh, but they're not even doing anything with the project because none of the teams are moving up to the main roster. What are you talking about? Hext moved up to the main roster. That was kind of the whole point of signing Carpe Diem. Just saying. And if you thought that they were going to change and interchange one of the main roster players with EG Black or EG White players after not even really a full season, because they didn't really get to play an entire season, um, at least not to the best of their ability. There wasn't a lot of prep time for Nealon and Vorborg and the guys to really gel together. Mind you, this is basically an entire new team. I think it's pretty fair to say that yeah, they were probably going to have another season, and this will be their next season. So I think it's very clear to me if they don't perform this season, there will be roster moves, and you will see players from EG White or EG Black move into the main roster. I think that's going to happen if EG Blue does not perform, or if one of the players on EG Blue doesn't perform. You can probably be expecting to see that happen. Um, so yeah, and so yeah, I mean EG Black. What more can I say? Wiz developing as an opper, Walco developing as an in-game leader, Hex moving up to the main roster. George getting brought on to EG Black and has been performing really well. And what we're looking to see with George is really just a consistency and just consistently fragging at a high level. Because sometimes his consistency was a little bit shaky, but obviously the potential is there. You saw how well he performed with Nouns during the major qualifier. So I mean, the talent is there. The dude really is just the next best talent in NA, and so obviously a good idea for EG to pick him up. And who knows, maybe Stanislaw and Rush can help him learn new things and develop as a player. Right? It's obviously a good thing. I don't see how it's not. Chop, even though he's not on the roster anymore, you can definitely see he improved as a player while on the roster. I think, and so yeah, I just don't really get that, honestly. So EG Black killing it in ECL, playing in the finals right now, by the way. And then EG White they won Fragadelphia. They're one of the best rosters. CCT hasn't really gone their way because they, unfortunately for them, had to play Pain Gaming, who was just one of the best teams at that, who was one of the best teams at that event, who, by the way, won the entire event and pretty much beat every team they played. EG White actually put up a decent fight against them. MIBR, kind of similar, but Nouns didn't really put up too much of a fight. Nouns actually beat Complexity in that event, which is a roster, in Complexity. I don't think Complexity gets criticized nearly enough, or nearly, maybe not nearly enough, but they don't get criticized to nearly the same degree that Evil Geniuses gets criticized. But whatever. I'm just an EG fan, so my opinion doesn't matter. Um, moving on. So he mentions, let's see here. How come Nouns is developing quicker and more clearly than EG Black? I think everything I just said pretty much just rips that argument into shreds. Um, Nouns isn't developing quicker or more clearly. I don't really see how you could get that impression. I mean, don't get me wrong, it sounds like I'm shitting on Nouns. I really fucking like Nouns. I actually think, like I mentioned in the past, Nouns would have been the roster that EG would have picked up if Gaming Gladiators didn't have control of the roster at the time that the Blueprint project was started. I definitely think this Nouns roster would have been picked up because you got guys like Semphis who are extremely experienced in the North American scene, and he would obviously be a good pickup for a project like EG's Blueprint project. And the players on the Nouns roster are very talented, and I just can't see how that wouldn't be a smart decision for EG to make. Especially now they've picked up Stamina, who I've already mentioned before is definitely the next in-game leader to look at in terms of North American in-game leaders, because not only does he have the in-game leading ability, but he's also a really good fragger as well for an in-game leader and can do a lot of different roles. So, yeah, I really value Stamina as an in-game leader. And so, I've already called for multiple times. I have said Nouns and Ironblood. Those are the rosters you want to look at for new developing talent. And Stamina being on Nouns is just, I mean, what more do you want? You know what I mean? Like, it's just Nouns is an incredible project. And I've also mentioned in the past that Nouns, at least from what I heard from the Double Doors podcast and Ryan at Dust 2 and I think Luke, I don't know who else was on the podcast at the time. Can't remember. Um, sorry about that. But they mentioned that Nouns is I knew they were a crypto funded type organization, but I didn't know that that meant that they were basically, they didn't really give these guys an actual contract. They're kind of just giving them promises to pay them money. Look, that's probably not going to go very well considering crypto is kind of getting, destroyed right now. Um, yeah, who knows? All I'm saying is there's potential for a lot of pickups from that Nouns roster to be made um, for EG. So I would say EG, look at fucking Nouns. They're definitely the next best. Those are the people you want to be trying to grab for the Blueprint project. From the coach in Semphis to the in-game leader in Stamina to the players on the roster who are obviously talented. Those are the players you want to look at. Um, so I want to clarify, Nouns is developing very well, and they've been very, they've developed well. I don't know about quicker. I think even when they were gaming Gladiators, they were one of the best teams in North America. So that part doesn't really make much sense to me. But yeah, they're definitely a good roster in North America. They're one of the best in NA. They beat Complexity multiple times in the past couple months. So obviously a good roster. But I think EG Black is better than them and has proved it in this playoffs. Because they fucking played EG Black in this playoffs and EG won. Nouns took the first map 16-12 and then EG Black won 16-13 on Overpass and 19-15 on Inferno. Very close games, but they won nonetheless, and then Nouns ended up losing to ADK and is out of the tournament. Meanwhile, EG Black, well, actually, I'm looking at this now. It looks like they potentially might lose the third map and might go down 3-1 and lose the series, which sucks. But EG Black has had a very, very good ECL run, even if they lose in this grand final. I think that much is undeniable at this point. So, and they've developed talent, and I don't know. This EG Black roster has been really, really good. So I don't really see how someone can claim that Nouns has been doing better than EG Black when EG Black has very obviously been a better team throughout ECL this season, which is what you want to look at. So yeah, let's see. What else do we have here? Um, just kind of looking around. Let's see what else I can find. He did make an accusation that um, EG has a less than 50% win rate, which, by the way, like, sure, what the fuck does that even? Okay. and barely played. Like they're not even in the top 20. Yeah, they're listen. I'm not saying they're a good team. I'm just saying they're better than Complexity, which Complexity is not very good. Um, uh, they barely EG barely played against any good teams in decent events. I mean, really, this is what we're gonna do? Really? Look, I'll admit they've lost a lot of their games against top tier teams. By the way, kind of expected considering it's a brand new roster and team's not good. They're not they're not a top 15 team in the world. They're not a top 10 team in the world. They're going to lose to top 10 teams. They're going to lose to top 15 teams. It's going to happen. Like so when he says this, I think very important to understand context, right? Very very important. In the blast groups, which again, I don't know how many times I have to say this, I barely fucking qualify this as even an event for EG because they didn't even have their they didn't have automatic. They didn't even have players that were supposed to be playing the right roles. It was a shit show. The team had barely any time to practice. So look, blast group stages, whatever. But when they did have automatic in the little, I don't want to call it the playoffs because it wasn't the playoffs, but you know what I'm talking about. They played NIP, who at the time was this was what they said coming into this event that NIP said before this event they just had the best boot camp they've ever had with with the roster they had. Just remember that. Before LXCB. Remember that. EG lost 2-1. Mind you, that's a damn good result for EG considering that EG's good results are typically like before this point I was like getting 10 rounds on a map against a top team. I'm not fucking kidding. They literally wouldn't get 10 rounds against good teams. So winning a map was huge. I remember this because I watched the series and I literally took a screenshot when I was watching because it was so incredible to me that EG could even be competing against the top team because that's how bad EG was the past year and a half, especially the end of beginning the first half of this year. I remember EG started like 5-0 on Nuke, and then it showed like the EG logo with like the fire thing around the logo, and I remember just taking a picture of it in shock and awe because I'd never seen EG have that logo with the fire around it, and for so long, like that's how bad it was for EG guys. So important to understand the context. They ended up not doing well against that. You know, they had an 8-7 half on their T side of Nuke, and then they choked it and they were fucking awful on their CT side. But then they did a dominant overpass game where they shit on NIP, and then they lost in Inferno in a 16-11 game, which to me showed potential, right? And winning a map against the top team was a big deal for me. Um, so overall, I was pretty happy with that, considering where we came from. And then they went into the North American online qualifier. They almost lost to Limitless, which was a bit scary because obviously Stamina is just the EG killer, and he just fucking kills EG teams. He killed them at the last major qualifier with Strife, and he was gonna do it again with Limitless, and it didn't happen. And then after that little scare, EG pretty much ran around, ran through the rest of the qualifier, not really any issues. There was a 16-13 against Team One, but if you understand the context, it was that EG was basically choking that game. They had basically had it all but won, and Team One made a massive comeback, but it wasn't enough. Um, and then EG rolled over B-Hop and ATK. They qualified for the RMR qualifier in Stockholm. They went to EPL. They played Cloud9, who is obviously going to shit on them. They're a super experienced roster. And not only that, but Nealand's calling style is a more CIS calling style. I'm sure Cloud9 was just super fucking used to that shit, knew exactly what to do with it. Yeah, Cloud9's just a top 5 team in the world, so you're gonna get shit on by them. They played Team Liquid. The same thing fucking happened because Team Liquid is a top 5 team in the world. If you really thought that EG in their second event with the roster, their first real event with the roster, really, because ESL Pro League really was the first real event with the roster, with the full lineup, with some type of preparation. If you really thought they were gonna beat Cloud9 and Liquid, even on a map, I mean, that was very hopeful. Of you to expect that with this roster. So then they played Eternal Fire. They 2-0'd them, no problem. And then they played Movie Star Riders, and they 2-0'd them, no problem. So Like, that's exactly what you want to see out of EG. And then they had a 2-0 against Furia where they lost 2-0 to Furia in the Pro League, where it was a 16-11 on Overpass and a 16-12 on Nuke. Mind you, that 16-12 on Nuke was the game where EG consistently lost anti-eco rounds where they should be killing people with pistols. It was actually a game that I thought EG should have won that Nuke match, but they didn't. And I believe on Overpass it was somewhat, it was kind of just a weird game where they kind of lost too many rounds they shouldn't have lost. That was kind of the story of them at EPL, was losing rounds they shouldn't have lost. It ended up costing them a group spot or a playoff spot for EPL. But overall, you played, Cloud9 and Liquid, top 5 teams in the world. And then you had to play Furia, who, um, look, maybe you would have wanted to see a better result, but overall, um, a good pro league for EG. Like, most people had them again bottom of the group, and so they almost made it into the playoffs. What are you gonna? Can you really complain that much about it? Um, Going into the Road to Rio, this was their best event of the year. They played Nouns, they beat them. They played Furia, a rematch, mind you, and they played it on Nuke. The map where I literally just said they lost to Furia, and they won 16-14. And in fact, they should have won 16 like 13 or something, 16 or 16-12 or something like that. That was 16-13. But they lost a 1v2 clutch in miraculous fashion to like Safe, I think, with an op on the A bomb site. But then they shut them down immediately the next round and won the map. So good result there. They played 9Z in their decider game. They won 2-1. And then they played Team Liquid and they lost 0-2, but it was a 23-25 game on Ancient, a map that EG literally does not play very much at all, and then a 17-19 game on Overpass. What do you want, man? Top 5 team in the world, they almost beat them in a high stakes match because it meant that if you won that match in that best of 3, you would go to the legend stage of the major. A very, very important game for EG. So I don't want to hear this bullshit that Team Liquid wouldn't have cared and didn't try, because they quite clearly needed to care about those games. So about those maps. So important game against a top 5 team in the world, and they almost won. Yes, then they went to the Fall Showdown, the Blast Fall Showdown, which was probably their worst event of the year, I guess, if you want to even whatever. It was an online qualifier against. How many times do I have to fucking explain this? It was an online qualifier against a team that wasn't going to be at the major, so this was their major. This was their major qualifier. Not only that, they were probably one of the best underdog teams for the entire fucking online qualifier. They were literally. I mean, their roster is pretty stacked when you look at it. It's, Lukowski, who was incredible this online qualifier, Phelps, Lux, Woody, who used to be on MIBR, and VSM. Guys, this is not a shit roster. This is definitely a good roster that you have to take seriously. And it was a close series where EG picked Dust. EG played on Dust 2, Mirage, and Nuke. And while they didn't pick Dust 2, they should have known Fluxo was going to go with Dust 2, and they clearly did know they were going to go with Dust 2, and they should have won Dust 2. This was a game where the Dust 2 game, not only did they lose rounds they shouldn't, aka they lost a Ninja Diffuse, I believe. They also lost a round where they basically killed everybody with pistols, but then they still lost the round. They lost a lot of rounds they shouldn't have lost, and then even with all that, in regulation, they were up 15-14 going into overtime, and they had the perfect stack toward the B bomb site to defend against Fluxo, and Lukowski just tech 9'd like 2 or 3 people and fucking won the round. So that's how they lost Dust 2. Then they went to Mirage, where EG won 16-11, and then they lost on Nuke. I mean, yeah, obviously a disappointment, but by the way, Fluxo went on to win the entire online qualifier. And where did Complexity end up? Oh yeah, they lost to Sharks in the first round, guys. Sharks. I'm pretty sure Fluxo was much better than Sharks. Just want to throw that out there. So, yes, it was their worst event, but there's a lot of context there, and EG quite clearly played Dust 2 knowing that Fluxo was good at it because they wanted to test themselves for the major. Obviously. Then they went to the major. They beat IHC. They then played Mouse. They lost to Mouse on Mirage. Now, when you look at it with fucking context, Mouse had a damn good tournament, didn't they? They went to the semifinal of the major. Not a bad loss in a best of one. And Mouse is favored in that best of one, even without that context. They're a better, more experienced team. Simple as that. 9Z. This was a game they should have won. This is the only match in the major that I feel like you can justifiably say they should have won and they lost. They definitely should have won this nuke game. They had a decent CT side and they struggled on T side. Look, again, I don't like saying this because as an EG fan, it makes it look like I'm just coming up with bullshit excuses. But I don't know how many times people have to mention the fact that the Brazilians were, not exactly being the most non-biased home crowd in the sense of, cheating. I wouldn't be shocked if some of that happened here. But even with all of that, right? Let's take that out of the equation. EG should have won this game. They didn't win the game. They played 9Z, a team that has given EG a lot of trouble in the past. A team that has been kind of underdogs for a while now and performs above their weight. And is not a team to take lightly. And EG didn't take them lightly, but this just wasn't it for them, right? They just couldn't pull it out. You could go to the inexperience of the roster in terms of Hext, and even players like Automatic and Breeze and Zerk haven't really played on a stage with a crowd in front of them in a really long time, as Vorborg mentioned in the interview. So look, I'm not saying that the EG should have lost this game. They definitely shouldn't have. But it was a 1917 game in a major with a crowd. It sucks. It shouldn't have happened. It put them in a really, really bad position, and it shouldn't have happened. But to say that this is like some fucking atrocious disaster is like beyond me. Then they played Cloud9 because Cloud9, mind you, fucked everybody by going 0-2, and there was no hope EG was going to beat Cloud9 in this series. This is a Cloud9 roster that at the time had just beaten Imperial, which is obviously a massive mental hurdle for them, considering Imperial was the team that knocked them out of the major in the previous major. So beating Imperial in front of Imperial's crowd and Imperial fans was a massive fucking deal for Cloud9. And it showed in this series as they 16-5'd EG on Dust 2, and then on Overpass. Overpass was actually quite close, even with the dominant first half by Cloud9. But yeah, it wasn't enough. EG ended up losing on Overpass and losing the series. Not the best, obviously, but I mean, Cloud9 was just they were hitting their form. If you guys remember Cloud9 during that major, once they from when they played Imperial to when they went to the playoffs of the major, I don't think they lost a single map. So if you really thought EG was going to beat Cloud9, you were off your rocker. Was it a bad major if you look at overall? You just look at wins and losses. Yeah. Look, they went 1-3, right? 1-3. That's obviously not good. But I think when you put into context the teams they played, which again, is Mao's a top 5 team in the world? No. But was Mao's a top 5 team in the event? Yeah. They ended up, by definition of placings, they were a top 5 team at the event. They made it to the semifinal. They beat Cloud9 in the quarterfinal. A very legit win. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say? It sucks, but it happens. So, look, with going through all of that information, like, I just think it's very, very disingenuous to say they didn't play against any good teams in decent events. They quite clearly did. They didn't perform that well against them, but it definitely got better over time. Like, the first times they played Cloud9 and Liquid compared to the last times they played Cloud9 and Liquid were very, very different games. And just ignoring that, to me, is kind of fucking ridiculous. So yeah, I don't know. It's just crazy to me. Also, he mentions that they went out in last place every time, which they just obviously by definition didn't do. Look, all of this to say, now that I've been talking about this for 33 minutes, Let's see if I can find anything. Is there anything else that I can find here? Is there anything else that I can find here? Shoot. Trying to see. I don't know, guys. I'm not finding a whole lot else here. Is that it? Did I go through it all? I hope I did. Oh, here we go. What other roster can keep a core trio for years without showing hints of improving? They have shown hints of improving. They literally just showed it this season. If you can't see that, then again, you're not paying attention. Oh, he mentions that they're check stealers. Let me just bring up the check stealer thing, because ever since Richard Lewis has used it, I feel like people just throw that shit out there just to say it without really understanding what a check stealer is. Not that he uses it incorrectly. Richard Lewis is a fucking G. Of course he uses it correctly. But my thing is, let's get this straight. There was definitely a time where you could have made the valid argument that EG players were check stealers. Obviously, Stewie 2K is a fucking check stealer. I don't know what else you need to prove that he's a fucking check stealer, other than everything he's already self-incriminated about. You could probably make the argument for like Stan at a period of time as well. Probably Breeze at some points. Yeah, definitely, 100%. The only player really where I look at it and I go, I don't think you can call this player for sure a check stealer is really Cirque, which I know is something that immediately people are going to be like, how? Like, he's been so shit. Like, how is he not a check stealer? This is because people don't know what a check stealer means or what the definition of a check stealer is. A check stealer is someone who is collecting money because they're being paid to do a job, and not only are they not doing it, but they are choosing to not do it. They are actively not doing it and not even trying at it. That is not what Cirque has been. That's not what Cirque has been. I don't know how many times I have to find an interview or interview somebody else. I think even Warborg mentioned it, where somebody says and points out that Cirque has one of the best work ethics, and that he literally has, even though EG has been so dog shit, he has been constantly over the past couple of years been trying to improve, been working at his game. He's been constantly doing it, even while EG has been fucking atrocious. I'm talking about first half of this year, the entirety of last year. He was constantly working. Did it show in his results? No. But can you say that he was stealing checks because he wasn't giving a fuck about his performances and he clearly just wanted the money? No. That is not what happened. He clearly fucking cared. He clearly was putting the work in. Did his performances deserve the money he received? No, they didn't. They just didn't. Same thing with Breeze. But unlike Breeze, Cirque didn't ask for a fucking break. Cirque didn't ask for a fucking break when the roster couldn't get 10 rounds against literally any team. He didn't ask for a fucking break. He asked to see his family, which I think is pretty fucking justifiable when you've been fucking literally just losing games for 2 years straight. Not even getting 10 rounds, your confidence is shot beyond belief, and you're away from your family, and COVID is going on. Yeah, I bet he did want to see his fucking family. I bet you would have too. So don't fucking call him a check stealer. Does he get paid a lot of money relative to his lackluster performances? Yeah, he does. Does that need to change? Yeah, it does. Am I saying that it's going to be okay if Cirque doesn't perform next season? No. I genuinely think if Cirque doesn't perform well enough next season, he definitely he definitely took the right steps this season, but he needs to be more consistent and better. if he's not able to do that this season, yeah, I think his spot's on the line. Like I think Ponelin is going to take a spot. I think Wiz is going to take a spot. Somebody's going to take a spot. I don't know who, but somebody's taking it, right? But to sit here and say that he's a check stealer, I just don't feel like that's fair for him. Maybe it's fair for the other players on EG. I don't know that it's, especially with Breeze in the sense that there was a period of time where he obviously wanted a break, which, by the way, isn't even that crazy of a concept when you consider that they were so shit for so long. But he wanted a break. He forced the org to give him a break. And then, even with all that, there were rumors about him going to Valorant and joining like 100 Thieves. So, yes, if you want to pin it on Breeze, go ahead and pin it on Breeze. If you want to pin it on Stanislaw at a period of time when he was in game leading for the squad, pin it on Stanislaw. Whatever the fuck you want to do. But I think you got to draw the line at Cirque, because I do think Cirque actually fucking cared. I think he worked his ass off and he just could not get better. I don't think people really understand how fucking hard it is to just turn. Like, did people really just expect with this new EG roster for Cirque and Breeze to just do a fucking 180 and go from like where they've been at to like 2019 all over again in just the span of like a month? Did you really think that was going to happen? Or even a couple of months with the new roster? Did you really expect that to happen, even with the new culture that EG has been pushing into this main roster? Because if you can't see the fact that the culture has changed from beginning of this year to the end of this year, I don't know what the fuck you're looking at. But if you seriously thought Cirque was going to turn into 2019 Cirque in 3 months after not only just losing every single fucking game and not getting 10 rounds for 2 years, but also individually performing really, really poorly while working on your game extremely fucking hard and still not seeing any improvement, and your confidence gets shot through the fucking, like, just gets shot to the ground, below the ground, when you're an opper and confidence is literally the most important thing you can have. And by the way, especially when you're working super hard to improve, and then when you don't see that improvement happening while working really hard, that just makes you even more depressed. Did you guys really expect Cirque to turn into 2019 Cirque in 3 months? Did you really expect that? At some point, you have to take the argument of he's getting paid too much money, and you need to actually look at the context of the situation. It's why, like, my obvious example is like with the Sixers, Tobias Harris will never get the credit he deserves. He's changed positions and roles so many times within this new roster, and he's had been asked to do basically everything on the roster, and is an incredibly good and talented player. He went from being this when he joined the roster to being asked to be the second best player on the roster to now being the fourth option on the team, who's basically a catch and shoot player. Who then, when we don't know what to fucking do with the ball, we give it to him and tell him, "Please God, do something." That's basically what Tobias. And now we want you to play good defense, which he's been doing for the past couple of seasons. Like, he's been doing everything. He's the Swiss Army knife for the 76ers. Nobody gives him any fucking credit. You want to know why? And he'll never get the credit he deserves. You want to know why? Because he's getting paid a ridiculous amount of fucking money to play basketball. Way more money than he deserves. But I don't think that means that you can just discredit everything that he's done. Because guess what? There's two options in that situation. You either, one, take the money, complain to the organization that you're not getting what you want, and fucking leave. Or just don't play well and just keep eating your money. Or two, you can say, "Hey, I'm I'm getting paid the big bucks. I need to be a role model for this team. I need to step up to the plate and take on whatever role is asked of me. And even though I know people aren't going to give me the credit I deserve, I should still work for it. I should still work with the hope that maybe I can live up to it. I should do it as much justice as I can." And I think Cirque has tried that. I really do. I really do think Cirque has tried that. I really think he's tried his fucking best. So to call him a check stealer, to me, is just a blanket statement. Um, and so I want to point that out because I think that's not fair. And if you think, like, guys, what Smooya did was in really bad taste. Not only, like, look, that information in esports is typically private. If you want to make the argument that that shit should be public, go for it. But Smooya in no way should be saying shit like that. That shouldn't be his information to disclose. He was shitty for that. He was shitty for that. And if you don't think Cirque took that personally, I would be shocked if Cirque didn't take that hard. Just seeing all the fans, all the whole community reacting to it and calling him a shit player and a shit person because of it. Can you imagine what that must be like? To put your all into something, to see no improvement, to see the team be so fucking bad, and then for some random player who hasn't even done anything significant in his career in comparison to you, go put out in public information of what you're getting paid just for the community to rip you to shreds and call you a check stealer, to call you something that means that you aren't trying hard enough. It's disingenuous and it's fucking wrong, and I'm sick of it. So fucking cut it out. I got your back, sir. Again, they don't deserve what they're getting paid. Sure, it's a fair argument to make. Don't call Cirque a check stealer. It's in bad taste. Um, he mentions moving the goalpost. I just think the goalpost is different for each roster. I think that's pretty fair to say. Um, yeah, EG Black is doing good. EG White is doing good. EG White is looking even better. Hopefully, if CCT does its thing and is actually something they can compete in consistently. The main roster, I expect not big things, in the general sense this year, but I think this is really their season to prove how good they actually can be and actually are. You've had the season to kind of get the new guys introduced, and you had to work really fast to put this whole team together and to develop develop the squad. You brought Malik into the roster very late into the season, so this is your season. This is your season to get all the pieces together. Hey, we've had this roster now for a little bit. We've taken the time to understand what we're good at, understand what we're bad at. We got rid of Dust 2. We don't have to deal with Dust 2 anymore. That's a big plus for EG. It's the map they put a lot of work into, but clearly weren't very good at. Um, and so who knows how Anubis goes, right? But you know, my point being, right? This is it. This is the season to see how good EG actually is. And if they're not to the standards that we want them to be at, or that they should be at, obviously the roster moves will change. But I think it's important to instead of just rating how good EG is based off of how big the organization is, I think it's also important to rate EG based off of what the players on the roster are and what their expectations should be based off of the players on the roster. And I don't think people are doing that. I think people are just looking at how big EG is as an org, and they're saying, why isn't EG a top 10 team in the world? And at the same time, I could look at Complexity and be like, Complexity is owned by the Dallas fucking Cowboys. They have more money than God. Okay? Like, should they be performing as badly as they are? No, they shouldn't. Um, you know, Look, there's other teams I could use it with. I'm just using Complexity as an example. But I think EG gets criticized for these things much harsher than other organizations do. Um, Obviously, I'm not saying Complexity does not get criticized enough. They do get criticized enough. However, I think EG gets criticized much, much more, which isn't necessarily fair. Um, it's just because EG is just the perennial punching bag of Counter Strike. They just are. And unfortunately, the only way that'll ever change is if EG just consistently performs well at events. And even then, whenever they have an off event, they will get pummeled into the ground by the community once again. That's just how the scene works. If you want to be respected, you have to consistently perform to probably an unrealistic and unreasonable level. Especially when your reputation is as dog shit as EG. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to play the pity party for EG. They do it to themselves. They really do. GamerDoc does not fucking help the situation at all. The marketing team sometimes doesn't help. Um, you know, I think this roster has been very good and very positive overall, but obviously the problems that happened last season, or not last season, but the first half of the year, quite clearly had a very negative impact on the organization and the outlook on the organization, with the whole Stewie 2K drama and all the shit show that was. Um, so Yeah, it was just a fucking nightmare. So look, I think look in comparison to where EG was, around June, July of you know of this year to now, I think EG is in a much better place. They have an academy system that is showing promise, and I think is actually I'm very excited about actually at this point, because I can see enough. I've seen enough now to know that they actually do fucking care. They actually do want to develop players. Well, that'll be more proven, I think, if EG Blue doesn't perform this season and they make roster moves. But that's not something I'm gonna want to happen, because obviously I want the main roster. I want EG Blue to perform well. I want this EG Blue roster to perform really well, and to Vorborg. Look, I think sometimes what people might have heard what he said about I don't really when he said like I don't care about winning, or I don't care about I just care about progress. People take that the wrong way. They're like, you don't care about winning? What are you talking about? And it's like, guys, he's saying he doesn't care about winning because he cares about progress. Guess what? If you're progressing, the wins will naturally come with that. That's what he means. Okay? He's basically saying if we lose a game, but I think we play super well and we show promising signs of improvement, I'm not gonna be like it's black and white, it's a loss and it's bad. He's gonna take it as it's a loss, but look at what we learned. Look at how much better we've gotten, and next time we won't make those mistakes and we'll do better job, right? That's what's important. And also saying that EG just like doesn't care or some shit is fucking mental to me, when like obviously Vorborg and Automatic and when are fucking having like 8 hour long conversations. Like that's just fucking incredible to me. So yeah, anyways, that's kind of my drama, I guess, or not really my drama, but I was kind of using the criticism that was given to me as kind of like a way to format the episode. I know it was quite strange. It wasn't something that I typically do. It's usually a lot more structured than this. Um, but I kind of just wanted to. It was kind of the best way I could think of to kind of format this episode. So yeah, hopefully it wasn't too crazy, and hopefully, I won't be able to timestamp everything properly because it's kind of fluid, but hopefully. Some of the things I said make sense, and you can understand my logic of how I see this team, and the whole blueprint project really. Because I think people do not think for a second that I'm less critical of them because of anything that's happened with the interview, or because I'm a fan of the organization. That has nothing to do with it. Um, I see what I see, and I speak my mind on it. It's just that simple, really. Um, and so yeah, like I mean, look, I think EG Blue or EG Black, I think they just lost. I'm not gonna lie, I think they just lost. Yeah, they did. They just lost ECL in the final. Um, so that sucks, but shit happens. Shit happens. Um, Overall, super fucking good season. Super fucking good season. Um, you know, so nothing really to complain about there. Oh yeah, and your beloved Nouns 5th to 6th. Just just throwing that out there. Just hey, listen, I like Nouns. They're my boys. Listen, Stamina's my boy. I love Stamina. But if you're gonna throw that shit at me, I'm gonna throw it right back. Um, yeah, I think we can get to the bonus topic now. We can get to the bonus topic. So bonus topic, huh? Bonus topic. Let's see. So for those who are not aware, of the bonus topic for this episode, basically there was a lot of drama. Oh, I just moved the wrong thing. Oh, I just moved it again. There was a lot of drama, or there was some drama surrounding Shroud. Basically, it was like some clip where Freakazoid said Shroud was like could get multi frags better than Simple, and was like I don't know. He said he like basically implied that Shroud's talent level was like fucking off the charts, and like he could have been Simple. Uh, Listen, putting Shroud and Simple in the same sentence is already just kind of like scratching my head. But okay. Yeah, the main argument, and then Shroud replied or quote tweeted or something, and basically said like, yeah, it just kind of comes down to passion. Mostly comes down to passion. I just didn't have a passion for the game like Simple, and therefore I wasn't as good as Simple. Which is again kind of fucking crazy because he's implying that therefore it had nothing to do with talent, that he was just as talented as Simple, but he didn't care about the game as much. It's kind of what's implied there. Um, which is just kind of crazy. Just saying, like, dude, I'm sorry, Shroud was sick, but like, I can guarantee you, Simple's just better, like, just more talented, just in general. And so that kind of led to a thought process where I was like, dude, I don't even know that Shroud had the best aim in North American history, in North American CS history. So I did a poll where I said, who has better raw aim? Here, I'll show my screen. Who has better raw aim? Note, not the better player overall, just focusing on raw aiming ability. I'll look at the results and talk about this on next week's EG Bleed Blue episode as a bonus topic. As you can see by the results, Twists was had 11 votes and was the undeniable winner of this poll, followed by Breeze, followed by Elige, followed by Shroud. What did I expect from this poll? I expected honestly, I expected Twists and Elige to be near the top. I expected Breeze to be actually the lowest rated player, and I expected Shroud to be third. That's kind of what I expected from the poll. It's not exactly what happened. Do I think this is an accurate representation? Not necessarily. I think Elige is definitely not getting enough love in this poll. Elige is definitely look, he's more talented than Breeze. I'll just say now, like Breeze is an incredible aimer. I think Breeze is better than Shroud by far. I don't know about by far, but he's a better aimer than Shroud. Um, but I don't know about better than Elige. Like, come on, guys. I reckon this is some home cooking EG bias right here. Um, some EG fans just putting Breeze for the lulz. Because I don't think Breeze. I definitely wouldn't look at this poll and be like, yeah, Breeze has the best aim out of all the players there. I don't know about that, but Breeze is definitely talented. Definitely talented. Yeah, I expected Elige to probably top off the list. Honestly, I thought Elige would win this poll, and he didn't. He only got 18% of the votes. Twist winning it out. Part of that I'm sure has to do with how good FaZe is right now. Um, and Twist is always a person that a lot of people like. I'm included in that. I like Twist's aim. I'm a low sense player, I naturally kind of watch a lot of Twists and deathmatch and stuff. So I understand it. Twist is a very likable guy. You know. But yeah, I expected Legion Twist to be at the top, and then followed by Shroud and then Breeze, because I figured Shroud would get enough popularity votes to probably just kind of slide into third, even though I think Breeze is better. Yeah, I think Alicia's seriously criminally underrated here, man. This is insane to me. 18.2%, guys? Really? 18.2? Like, guys, Alicia's probably the best player to ever come out of North America. Like, I don't know about this. This is a little criminal. I'm not gonna lie, guys. This is pretty criminal. 18.2%. Jesus. That's yeah, that's kind of nuts. But yeah, anyways, it was a pretty fun poll to make. My point basically just being like, if Shroud is so fucking talented, how come he's not even the most talented he's not even the top 3 most talented players to ever come out of NA? Like, and that's from a raw aim perspective. So like, how are you going to sit there and say that his talent level was the same? Could have been he could have been as good as Simple. Like, if he had more passion. And it's like Elige has better aim than Shroud, and Elige has incredible amounts of passion for the game. Elige is not Simple. I think that says everything you need to know. So that was my little bonus topic. What do you think about the bonus topic? If you didn't participate in this poll, what do you think? How would you have the rankings? Right. That's an interesting question, right? Like maybe not who would you vote for in this poll if you didn't participate, but even if you did participate, what order did you expect this poll to result in? Who did you think was going to be at the top? Who did you think was going to be at the bottom? What would be your ranking if you had to rank again off of raw aiming ability? Has nothing to do with how they are in their careers. Has nothing to do with any of that. Which is obviously why I think people just didn't fucking listen to this part because Twist got way more votes than I expected. Um, I expected Twist to get a lot of votes, but I wasn't expecting Elige to only get 18% of the votes. To me, that's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy. Um, so I think people definitely didn't apply the just focusing on raw aiming ability. They definitely took into consideration things like who they like because of what team they're on, or how good they are, or what team, how well is the team that they're on playing currently, whatever. Um, and obviously the Breeze votes. Listen, Breeze is a good aimer. I put him on the list because I think he's probably one of the best aimers to ever come out of North America. And I think he's better than Shroud. But he's not better than Alicia or Twists. Like Alicia and Twists are just that good. You know what I mean? But I think Breeze is up there. I think he's in that conversation. I just don't think he's better than Alicia Twists. But I think he's in that running. He's in that pack of whatever that pack would be. Breeze is there. And if you don't think he's there, you clearly are just ignoring history. And just watch the guy aim, dude. If you've seen this guy aim, it's fucking incredible. Like, go watch a Breeze demo and tell me the dude isn't just fucking talented. Um, in terms of his raw aiming ability. Um, but yeah, that was my thoughts on the poll. Kind of, I thought it was an interesting question. I thought it'd be kind of cool to have bring something fun out of the shit show that was the Shroud post. Because it was pretty bad. Um, but you know, those are my thoughts. So let me know what order you guys would have had. Um, the players in. I think that would be an interesting thing to find out. So yeah. Other than that, guys, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I have to say um, about EG this episode. Yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments and on Twitter or whatnot. Socials are in the description box below. There probably won't be timestamps for this episode because, like I said, it's kind of fluid. Things are just kind of I was just kind of saying things as they came to mind. Not what I normally do, but it's pretty late here at Sunday night, so just kind of wanted to get the podcast episode out. Um, and I figured, it was a good way to kind of the criticisms I got. It was a good way for me to address everything I wanted to talk about. And so I kind of just wanted to make it a little bit more fluid for this episode. Um, but yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode of podcast.